We just like to keep them guessing. It's all good.
That's right.
It is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. It is Wednesday, March 17th, and we are here for gating committee meeting. I'll tell you, appreciated this group all year, but this is a dedicated group. It's spring break. Tuning in for a gating committee meeting, and anyone else that's joining us on YouTube today. So committee should have received probably early morning some data and how exciting to see. The data has not looked better. This is probably the best we've seen so far on the data. We are going to go over each of those today and then get feedback from the committee of where we feel we should land at this point. So we will go ahead and start with the first one that we have is looking at our gating criteria considerations and any information to share on that one.
Yes. So according to the matrix, we are looking at week 31 and 32. We are at 2.8% for week 31 and 2.5% for week 32, which puts us at an average of 2.65%.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. If not, Latona's going to pull up the poll so we can get feedback of where you feel this should place us on the chart. Green, yellow, orange, or red? Okay. I think we had somebody that just came on. We are looking at number 1, and if you want to vote, there is still time on the gating criteria considerations. If not, we'll close the poll here in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I'd like to vote.
Okay, very good. Nikki, you want to give that rate one more time?
Sorry, week 31 was 2.8%, week 32 was 2.5%, so we are at an average of 2.65%.
There you go, Dr. Neatery. So based on that, if we're feeling green, yellow, orange, or red.
Okay. Just tell you green.
Okay, there we go. Appreciate the feedback. Poll is closed. Looks like this time we are landing in green. Okay. Moving on to the next category, it looks like community trend.
So the community trend on the Sedgwick County Health Department technically says stable because it's been so low. There hasn't been a spike or anything on their table. Our student data, if we look at week February 22nd through the 26th, we had 1 student. March 1st through March 5th, we had 1 student. March 8th through March 12th, we had 1 student. And since we met the last time 2 weeks ago, we have had 2 students. So we are definitely decreasing.
Okay, so looking at those same weeks for staff, the week of February 22nd through 26th, we had 3 staff members. March 1st through 5th, we had 1. March 8th through 12th, we had 1. And then to date, for the week of March 15th through 19th to date, we have none. So that would also be decreasing.
Questions or discussions on any of that information? Okay, if not, Latona will pull up the poll. All right, majority has us in green for this one. All right, moving on to the next category. Any information to share on that one?
Yes, so I already gave you the information on the students. If we look at the Sedgwick County matrix, this might be the first time in our whole year that we are not in the red with the Sedgwick County matrix. Week 31 was 64.3 and week 32 was 52.4, which adds up to 116.7.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, if no questions or discussion on that, we'll pull up the poll. All right, time, all right. Looks like a closer one on that, but it looks like the majority puts us in yellow in that category. The next one, building absenteeism. Holly?
Yep, so for building absenteeism, we had almost all of our schools. So again, this is a great 2-week window to take a look at where everyone is basically at 3% above baseline or less than 3% above their baseline absenteeism rate, except for Cooper Elementary. And then they too were just barely over in the yellow category. So we're looking at that and recommending based upon that we would be in green. Are there any questions I can answer about our attendance percentages?
Okay, if not, if we can come back if someone thinks of a question for Holly with students, but looking at staff absenteeism, if you looked at the resources that were provided in that email, the gating email, then you could see there was one building, support buildings were red for staff. We have very small number of teachers who work in support buildings that were out for a variety of reasons that caused that to come up red. None of it was COVID related at this point, so don't have concerns as far as that goes. Looking at the sub coverage and the number of staff in quarantine, going back to those same weeks where we talked about positive cases, February 26th, we had 5 staff in quarantine. March 5th, 5 staff, March 12th, 5 staff, and then March 16th, 2 staff. And then looking back at the last 2 weeks leading up to spring break, we had all of our substitute positions filled throughout the district. So we're really looking in a good spot regarding our staff absenteeism as well.
Okay, questions on that? Any discussion? Okay, if not, Latona will pull up the poll. All right, majority has us in green in this area. Moving on to our last area on our chart, when we look at our hospital rate.
Yes, so one of the items that we had been using is that Kdhe South Central Weekly Update, which was very specific. They are no longer updating that, and so we are back to the Kdhe website, choosing the South Central specifically, and that shows that there are 51% of ICU beds available, and then in Sedgwick County, it shows that only 39 out of 208 are being used for COVID, and there's, again, we still have that fun little green check mark that the hospital rates are good right now.
Any questions on this one? All right, if not, Latona will pull up the poll. All right, majority has us in green for our hospitals at this point. All right, looking at that, then the next piece, any discussion before we vote overall on the overall gating criteria color and placement this time? All right, if not, Latona will pull up the chart for that, where you feel overall we should be placed. Okay. Results are in. The majority have us placing the overall in green at this time. So green overall. When we look at our chart being placed in green, then when eliminate having the vote for elementary and middle school. Once we're in green, as you know, we are in person for both. So we would continue operating in person based on that at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels. However, we do need to look at our safety, security, logistics chart, see if we need to make any adjustments. As Latona gets ready to pull that up so we can take a look at that together and see where we currently have those placements, I will mention, and those I know in district probably saw via email, and same way with parents that are on the line, but just making sure our support staff, we appreciate doctors on there too, are aware. We have started taking steps. It was shared at the last board meeting, and the board even took action. That's where we're having just one more gating committee meeting, but starting to ease up. So we talked at the board meeting. It's one of those that we have staff in all different places, meaning people that are still very, very, very concerned about the situation, others that are really ready to get back to our normal. So it's trying to find in there a balance, making sure our staff feel safe, but we're taking those steps to get us back as safety allows, and working with recommendations from the Sedgwick County Health Department. So many of those that varied from looking at guest speakers, it could be in district field trip opportunities, all of those things. There was a list of items that were addressed. We do plan as a district leadership team revisiting again before that next gating committee meeting, and then also bringing to the board around that time additional recommendations here in a few weeks, and seeing if there's other items as we conclude through this end of the year that we can look at. So wanted to provide you that information at this point. So wanted to talk and take a look at this chart. Any comments and feedback on here? I do think there may be questions I'll mention regarding the mask piece of it. So I will mention about that. I do know, and we have provided the statement for several individuals, that Sedgwick County Health Department is still recommending that masks are worn. That was voted with Sedgwick County Commission that it can be left up to school boards on how that's handled in the school districts. So at this point, unless the board took any different action, that we would continue the recommendation of Sedgwick County Health Department. We do have a board meeting on Monday. I will mention we will take information. It will be coming out. We're working with DNEA. I know Joel's on the phone or on the call here, but we will provide information of where leadership and where staff are at in their comfort levels regarding masks. So that may come up, but we will have information, and that will further discuss. So for our discussion today, that we'd leave it right where it's at and recommend leaving it where it's at, because that would be a board action, and that's where masks fall. But for the rest of the chart, any discussion, or if you wish to leave it the same. So I'll open it up to the group at this point.
Heather, it seems like it would make sense to me if we move the hand washing and sanitation to the moderate level rather than every hour.
Okay, so recommended moving that down to the moderate level. Any discussion, questions on that? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Folkerts. Any other changes or recommendations?
Heather, it's Andy. I guess one question I would have, and I know you just talked about it with masks, and since we are at green, I mean, does it make sense based on this these guidelines that we set out to keep it at a high level when we've just agreed that it's too green. So the next step, if we moved it to moderate, would be that they would wear a mask during transitions, but have the option to have them off at their desks. Because some of the feedback I've gotten from parents is that, you know, they've got young kids that are trying to even learn to read and they can't see the teacher even talking to them. They can't read their lips. They can't understand some of the sounds, those types of things. So I just wonder, again, since we're at green, everything else would be at moderate. We'd even have one that's even lower than moderate. Why we wouldn't, at least as a committee, look at that and talk more about moving masks at least to moderate at this point in time.
I would have to say we definitely need to leave masks at high, simply because we are nowhere near herd immunity at this point. Not even half of our staff is vaccinated. Only 15% of the state is vaccinated. It's absolutely imperative that we keep masks till the end of the year.
And I would just follow up by saying I think that information from staff and staff preferences will be really critical for that. You know, I appreciate the comments that have been made about staff being on the front lines in this. And I just would encourage us not to make any changes until we hear their thoughts on the matter.
I think something important to keep in mind, and I think Amy could touch on it a little bit better than myself, but is without mask, quarantine and close contacts would rise. I mean, that's one of the things that's, I think, protecting kind of, people's seat time in class.
Yeah, as long as our kids are wearing masks, we don't have to quarantine them. So I think telling them they don't have to wear them, then you're putting them right back in that position of getting quarantined. And I just think staff, the teachers would feel more comfortable with everyone wearing masks at all times.
As a teacher, it's a lot harder to get compliance when there's like, well, sometimes you can take it off, sometimes you can leave it on. It's just easier for it to be all or nothing. And so I definitely recommend that we keep masks.
Another point of consideration is I'm seeing a lot more students returning back to campus for on-site learning for that fourth quarter. And these are parents that have had their students out for the bulk of the year due to their concerns and safety. So I would not want to negate their insight and input as well.
And I know we're starting second rounds of vaccinations today for staff, and it would certainly, I would feel a lot better about it having this discussion at the next meeting rather than at this meeting. That way we can get 2 weeks past and everybody who had the vaccine are at full.
And I talked to a couple of staff members today that aren't getting the shots yet because of doctors' severe allergies and things. I'm not willing to put anybody's health at risk. We're not at the end of the end. We're at the beginning of the end. We've got our health department saying leave your masks on. Most of the businesses are saying leave their masks on. What message are we sending if we say masks are not mandatory at Derby Public Schools? I just think it's a horrible health concern if we don't, and we're also modeling something that's not healthy.
Another thing to consider about doing away with the masks, we're coming back from spring break where people have been out traveling around. We don't know for sure what exposure they have, and I would be very, very hesitant to do without masks at this point.
So for the board members, I appreciate all the feedback, and if anyone else has anything, there'll be some additional time. But again, I think the recommendation on there and hearing this feedback, masks are one of those topics initially that the board took action on. I'd recommend bringing it back. To that, we will have the data and information so the board can make that decision about where we're at. But again, working with DNEA, we have 1,200 approximately employees. And we've said from the beginning of this, and as we're working to come out, that we have told staff that we want to make sure people may not always agree, but people feel they're being taken care of. We're listening and trying to gather that information. And so the board has where people feel they're at. One thing if you're split 50-50, another thing is if I think the board to have, it may be helpful to have that information if it's like, hey, we're feeling much like this call that at this point we need to keep the mask on. So we'll bring that if that's workable.
And Heather, I just want to say I appreciate everybody's feedback. I really do. And so this this would actually, whatever guidance we put out through this committee, Heather, would it go through April 17th? Is that right? Or the next gating committee?
This one would go through, how that would work is, thank you, right up here, through
No, it's April 16th.
April 16th, yes.
Okay, because I saw that April 2nd date on other stuff, and so I was curious. Okay, so this would be through the next gating committee meeting.
Through,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. And so again, appreciate everybody's feedback. Understand that not everybody's comfortable. I guess, you know, one thing to think about too, and again, would appreciate your feedback, whether it's now or offline, if you want to email me, whatever. But as far as, you know, making it optional, so those that are really concerned about it, especially after the vaccines are over, you know, to have the ability to not wear one, or if parents don't require their kids to wear one, but those that want to wear them would be an option. So I think the discussion needs to happen, because obviously this one, according to this chart, really sticks out. I mean, it's the only one we won't have moved at all. And like I said, I have gotten concerns from parents that, again, at least having some flexibility, whether or not it's a whole day or not, I don't think that would be the case, but at least when they're sitting at their desk and, like I said, trying to learn to read or pronounce a word, to have the flexibility to do that.
But I do think we have that option. We have remote learning. We have that option where they don't have to wear their mask at all if they're at home. I don't think anybody has a right to compromise anybody's safety until this is over in the school building.
And all I would say is remote learning is not an option for everybody. There are people that have to work and have to send their kids to school and can't be home to do that. So, and that's the case in this one instance I'm talking about.
Again, I'll state for the committee, the board could, again, need 4 votes, you know what I mean, to make any change. This one right here, again, mask, even though it's on this chart, it almost like needs to be kind of like how, I don't want to say shaded kind of in there with it. That's one, again, we voted and had the board vote. That's a major piece. We can bring recommendations and things too. And the intent is that it would be discussed, you know, on Monday and have some supporting information to take, you know, in consideration. We'll also state, in case people are watching at any time, if there are, you know, forward votes at a meeting, we have a meeting on Monday. We have a meeting after that on a Monday. It's a special board meeting. Can't change an agenda at a special board meeting, but can always have items on there, pre items. But as we are going through these months and trying to, you know, look at items, those are things that could be adjusted as data supports. But right now, I think 1,200 employees and looking. I think we'll bring those back, and as a board, I think we have 3 board members on today, can look at and see where staff are at. The questions on there too, I think Mr. Watkins' point, there'd be right now a draft. I know DNEA is reviewing it too. We'll get it out to leadership team in the next day. So principals that are on there, it's in the works. You'll be getting an email from me. But the question, how we have it worded right now, is whether they you wish to recommend continuing mask, or the other pieces that mask discontinue mask/mask become optional. So there's that choice on there that staff can weigh in, and the data, so the board members that are on here will know that you will receive it, so you know where the leadership team stands as a whole. And then you'll also see where the staff district-wide stand on the issue. So you'll have that to take in consideration. Now, we've talked a long time on masks. That's where I thought with that. Does that, any other comments before we vote on our chart here, or any other changes we need to look?
Heather, excuse me. I just would like to say, you know, this just came down yesterday from the county. So having the information to make a decision instead of just jumping right into it would be helpful. The only other thing I would say is by using the date, it does get us 2 weeks past spring break. So that will get us kind of out of that area if we're going to see a spike. So, you know, I don't see a problem with it. Working towards making an optional is something we can look at, but without information, I'm not ready to jump right now and say, okay, we're done with masks. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, any other adjustments on the chart that we need to? So the one adjustment is, if anyone happens to be tuning in that wasn't in, was it's looking at the hand washing and sanitation. Still will be done. Lots of sanitation and schools will be kept clean, but we're not saying that it has to be no less than once every hour. It is at designated times as the school sees fit to make sure that things are taken care of. Okay. All right. So with that change, let's pull up and make sure we're supportive of and reviewing. It should say safety logistics plan. You agree with the levels indicated on the chart as of right now. Okay, so we have the majority there, 86%. So we will proceed with that on the logistics plan. And then as was brought up, we will bring the mask on Monday to talk under gating criteria. All right, anything else for today? The next meeting I will mention is it is April 14th, Wednesday, April 14th. That is the final gating committee meeting for the year. See smiles, this is good. We are on the last one towards the end of the year. This is great. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for the discussion and input. Those of you that are on spring break, continue to enjoy. Those of you that are getting ready, I know there's a few on the screen, enjoy your couple days off and weekend. So we'll